Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
I found it interesting that every single time it was, the white person in the relationship who had this very sincere trust that the system would work for them, and always shocked when it didn't. At Clayton High School, I really loved writing films, and a professor told me that I maybe should think about this seriously as a career. And it really changed my life, I mean, it's incredibly formative. On top of that, driving back and forth from Clayton to West County every day, I had a fair share of my own interactions with police, which were never pleasant.
Shatara Michelle Ford's new film examines sexual assault by looking through the lens of a Black woman in a relationship with a white man. The director acknowledges drawing on their relationship with a white British guy and growing up in St. Louis on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. This is St. Louis on the Air. If you've already watched everything on Netflix and you're sick of the election, the 29th annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Fest is now underway. It offers a curated roster of movies you can stream from your couch, many of them with Missouri connections. One of those films is Test Pattern. It's a feature film that tackles a serious subject, a sexual assault on a young Black woman that shakes her world and puts her relationship to the test. It's a gripping movie with first-rate performances, and joining us to talk about it is director Shatara Michelle Ford. Shatara, welcome.
Hi.
So this is your first feature film, and it's a very heavy film in many ways. What drew you to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about consent. I wanted to have a deeper kind of nuanced analysis of the experiences of sexual assault, and I wanted to center Black women, Black femmes. I read a lot about rape kits not being tested, the backlog that I think we all know about. But the thing that shocked me the most in just kind of my deep research into this is the fact that rape kits themselves are really hard to come by in many places. And so you might go to a hospital and they might not know what you're talking about, or they might not have them in stock. You might go to an urgent care and they try to charge you, which they absolutely should not be doing. Or you might be someone who has experienced assault, rape, and don't even know that rape kits are a possibility, that a forensic exam is something that you could do if you wanted. And so I wanted to kind of go through that experience and have a deeper analysis of the kind of systemic problems that exist within navigating sexual assault and consent.
Well, I got to say, this was an eye-opener for me. I honestly had no idea that for a woman who would go to the emergency room and try to get a rape kit to gather evidence proving what happened to her, that these hospitals aren't ready to deal with that in many cases. I had no idea. I did a little research after watching this film. Sure enough, you're onto something here. But you're looking at these very serious issues, but it's also a very human film. We get to know these two characters, and we really get to know them in some nuanced ways. And this is an interracial couple. Did you base these two on anyone that you know, or were they people that you dreamed up?
Oh, well, I think, first of all, I'm in an interracial relationship. I'm married to a white British guy, actually. And I think that, we see eye to eye on many things, and I think he absolutely understands the experience that, I have navigating life in America. But I think the one thing that really came up, and this is honestly around 2014 after Mike Brown was shot. I'm originally from St. Louis. I grew up there. I understand what it's like to be a Black person in St. Louis. I think that, I don't know, I've always been very weird driving around the suburbs or driving around in areas that I'm not familiar with and engaging with police. And my partner understood that, I think, intellectually, but at times it kind of was always kind of not fully able to believe that the system might not work for me, or that I would have this mistrust of something if, I needed support. And so that's kind of the little seedlings of how I was kind of examining how just location impacts how you trust the system, how your identity, your sexuality, your gender, your race impacts how you trust the system. And so I thought that there'd be really interesting conflicts between just a white man and a black woman wanting to explore the healthcare system and the justice system together. They're definitely going to come out on different sides on that. So that's what that came from. Also, in the many stories that I heard, the research that I did, I came across interracial couples that were navigating something like this. And I found it interesting that every single time it was, the white person in the relationship who had this very sincere trust that the system would work for them, and always shocked when it didn't.
That is so interesting. And yeah, I don't want to give away anything that happens in this movie, but exploring sort of how that ends up being a fallacy, that's a big part of where this movie goes. I have to ask, though, you're talking about growing up in St. Louis, and clearly that shaped how you're approaching these issues. You ended up setting this film in Austin, Texas, and it evokes Austin in such particular and subtle and smart ways. I used to live in Texas. I felt like I was in Texas when I was watching this film. I was actually shocked to find out, no, you don't live in Texas. You live in Philly after growing up in St. Louis. What made you decide to make this a Texas story?
Well, yeah, first of all, if I could have said it in Missouri, I absolutely would have. I think that as a first-time filmmaker, you are going to, first-time independent filmmaker, I should say, you're going to make your project in a place where you have connections and access to resources. Unfortunately, St. Louis was not a place where I could easily mount up the type of production that I wanted to quickly. Whereas I had spent time in Austin, I had quite a few friends in Austin, and Austin's an incredibly filmmaker-friendly city. And what also worked in my favor is that I was having a conversation about kind of race and class that I think actually mirrors St. Louis in a lot of ways. And so what I thought that it could be a very good kind of comp in a way. So I felt like the things that I experienced and that I was analyzing, having grown up in St. Louis, I could definitely, explore that in Austin as well, especially on the front of just like policies. I think that, Texas has their own culture of some pretty strict and conservative reproductive access and bodily justice policies, and Missouri does too. Obviously, I think we all know about the conflicts that surround Planned Parenthood being one thing, and so I thought that in those two ways, that was a really interesting dynamic that Missouri and Texas share.
These are liberal cities in red states, setting it in
Absolutely.
Austin. We're talking to Shatara Michelle Ford. Her film is Test Pattern. You can watch it at the St. Louis International Film Festival. I recommend watching it. Shatara, I want to know a little bit more about your background. I'm now super intrigued after talking to you and watching this film. I understand it isn't just that you grew up in St. Louis. You grew up in some of its largely white suburbs. You were in Clayton, and then your family, I understand, is still in Creve Coeur. What was that like?
I think it was completely formative in the way that I view the world. I think that coming from St. Louis, you are, no matter where you're from, I think you are someone who thinks about race a lot. St. Louis is an incredibly segregated city, as well as our, inner and outer ring suburbs. And I think that I had the unique experience of being a Black person, going to school in Clayton schools, but not being a part of the voluntary student transfer program. My family moved to St. Louis in 1988. I was a year old, and my dad was a teacher at Clayton schools, and that's what allowed me to go there. So I got to see a lot, being, a lower middle class kid, not from Clayton, but also not from the neighborhoods that were busing students in. I got to see a really hyper I don't know, microcosm of kind of the class politics and racial politics that shape St. Louis on a daily basis. And it was hard. I graduated in 2005. In 2004, we asked really big questions about if we were going to continue the voluntary student transfer program. It didn't look like it was going to happen for a while. And we know that there have been lasting impacts of that decision from, over 15 years ago now. I was heavily involved in, questioning that, but I also recognized that, Clayton absolutely had a problem with integration and like true parity and racial justice and social justice work needed to be done. I think that even now conversations about race in Clayton is not anywhere near where it needs to be. My younger brother graduated from Clayton, I believe in 2016. And, he's still very, very, very active in challenging the Clayton School District to recognize, some of its failings. It's incredibly formative. On top of that, driving back and forth from Clayton to West County every day, I had a fair share of my own interactions with police, which were never pleasant. So, yeah.
So I want to ask you one thing. I mean, I know you studied race and politics and sociology. This was at Pitzer College in California. It sounds like a great path to academia, being a college professor. What made you decide, I'm going to make an independent film instead at great cost and a ton of work. I want to go this route.
I almost even got my PhD. It was like a very quick change, a few years ago. I'd always loved movies, always. My family were the ones who, every Friday night, we would go to West Olive 16 or Creve Coeur 12, sometimes the Esquire, and see a film. And I never really thought this is something that I could actually do. And it wasn't until college where I was, studying political science and sociology that I started taking a few screenwriting classes. I'd done a screenwriting independent study at Clayton High School. I really loved writing films. I thought, I had some open time. I would try it again. And a professor told me that I maybe should think about this seriously as a career. And it really changed my life, So I got an MFA in the UK in screenwriting and still was flirting with academia and applied to, PhD programs and made a plan to move back to the U.S. and do that. And at the last minute, I was just kind of like, you know what? I think I should actually take this seriously. I think what I actually want to be is a director. And so, I moved to Los Angeles 8 years ago and started down that path.
And here today is the result of all that labor. That is Test Pattern. It's a great movie. It's part of the St. Louis International Film Festival. That runs now through November 22nd, and you can screen all of these films from your couch. Go to cinemastlouis.org for more information. It costs just $10 to see this movie that we're talking about. And once you buy it, you have until November 22nd to watch it. So, Shatara Michelle Ford, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.